Alright everybody, final article and news story for today, and hopefully this one's a little more pleasant than that last one. Seriously, fuck that senior writer from RT. My god. I'll still use the source, it's verified, it's checked, it's reliable, but sometimes their attitudes are just, ugh. I don't even want to think about it anymore. So let's move on. Reason, free speech, free markets. A survey finds free speech restrictions are pretty popular. That's why we need the First Amendment. Right! The fact that they're popular is not a reason to get rid of either get rid of or modify the First Amendment. It's the reason to keep it. But most respondents, especially millennials, favored viewpoint-based censorship, suppression of hurtful or offensive speech in certain contexts, and legal penalties for wayward news organizations. Congress shall make... There's an image here that says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people, peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Or address of grievances. Yeah, unfortunately, all those rights that are protected by the First Amendment, yeah, a lot of those aren't really respected anymore. Bye-bye, 1791. The First Amendment is unpopular, which is why we need the First Amendment. A recent survey commissioned by the Campaign for Free Speech underlines that point, finding that most Americans support viewpoint-based censorship, suppression of hurtful or offensive speech in universities or on social media. Government action against newspapers and TV stations that print or air biased, inflammatory, or false content, and revising the First Amendment, which goes too far in allowing hate speech to reflect the cultural norms of today. The last position was endorsed by just 51% of respondents, compared to 42% who disagreed and 7% who had no opinion. But 57% favored legal penalties for wayward news organizations. 61% supported censorship of hurtful or offensive speech in certain contexts, and 63% said the government should restrict the speech of racists, neo-Nazis, radical Islamists, Holocaust deniers, anti-vaccine activists, and/or climate change skeptics. Well, I fit into that last category. On a more heartening note, the idea of tasking a government agency with reviewing the output of alternative media sources mustered support from just 36% of respondents, although the opponents still fell short of a majority. Likewise with the law against hate speech, which 48% favored and just 31% opposed. The findings are frankly extraordinary. Bob Lystad, executive director of the Campaign for Free Speech, told Washington Free Beacon, our free speech rights and our free press rights have evolved well over 200 years, and people now seem to be rethinking them. Here's the problem with your position. I will now make use of my most annoying talent. Everybody hates it, even me. My ability to point out the flaw in a thing and criticize said thing for having said flaw. And here it is. The definition of hate speech is very, very encompassing. It expands almost every day to include something new. Anytime a liberal or far leftist sees something they don't like, and immediately it becomes part of the definition of hate speech, it's ever expanding. That shit's crazy. You realize how much speech you'd be banning if you made it illegal? Half the English language wouldn't even be usable anymore at this point. It's constantly expanding day by day. How do you keep track of that shit? Initially, it was stuff like racism, homophobia, transism, but now basically anything that they deem as a negative statement or a degrading statement toward a group that has been historically abused or oppressed is now hate speech. That also includes women now. Any minority of any kind. That shit expands all the time. Plus, you do realize that when you give the government the ability to regulate a person's behavior, you're giving them the ability to control that person on the fundamental level. They can control their actions through law enforcement. There's a word for that. Tyranny! This is why the rights guaranteed in the Constitution exist, to prevent tyranny. You're just going to have to accept your hate speech as part of the cost of avoiding tyranny. You're just going to have to live with it. And besides, wanting to suppress the speech of people who provide an opposing opinion makes it look like you've got something to hide. Like you're afraid of what they have to say. If it is the truth, then it has nothing to fear from being questioned. That's what makes it true. If it is the truth, questioning it will only confirm that it is true. If you're suppressing their speech, it looks like you've got something to hide, and maybe I think you do. How do you like that? But moving forward, we have no data for prior years from this poll, which was conducted by a Caravan Surveys in early September with a sample of about 1,000 adults. It is therefore hard to say, based on these results, whether Americans are actually rethinking their support for freedom of speech or simply expressing the qualms they've always had. Survey data from the Freedom Forum Institute indicate that the share of Americans who think the rights guaranteed in the First Amendment go too far has fluctuated quite a bit since 1999. It was 29% in a survey conducted this year, which is higher than the previous 4 years, but far from a record during the last 2 decades. Still, the breakdown of responses by age in the Campaign for Free Speech survey does not bode well for the future. Almost every question millennials aged 21 to 38 were more likely to support speech restrictions than older respondents were. But contrary to what you might think, people with college degrees were less inclined to favor speech restrictions than respondents who either did not attend or did not complete college. If the rights guaranteed by the First Amendment were consistently supported by most Americans, of course, there would be a little need to enshrine them in the Constitution. The whole point of a constitutional guarantee is to protect fundamental rights against the whims of passing majorities. While Lystad is right that a decisive turn in public opinion against freedom of speech and the press could jeopardize these liberties in the long term, it's not clear we are experiencing such a shift. No, in fact, a group of only 1,000 respondents seems a bit small. Don't mind the sound of the cat whining in the background. I think you can pretty much hear him. He wants in. I'll let him in a little bit. Let him stay out there for a little bit, and then I can feed him. Because I'm not done yet, people. I am not even close to done yet. Well, maybe I am. Maybe I am pretty close. But you get my point. Just because a passing majority wants to curb your right of free speech doesn't mean they can. The First Amendment was put in there in the first place to prevent this very thing from happening. They don't seem to appreciate the fact that this creates a possibility for tyranny, and it also creates a precedent that, well, if we can restrict your speech, what's to say that they can't use that as a precedent for further restriction in the future? And it makes it look like you've got something to hide when you restrict a dissenting opinion. And who knows, maybe you do. Bottom line is, do not mess with the First Amendment. Just don't. People will find a way around it if you do. It's tyranny, plain and simple. And you know what else? A group of 1,000 people is just too small to guarantee that, because people have been having qualms and second thoughts about the First Amendment for a long, long time. So it doesn't mean shit. It doesn't mean shit. The bottom line is, folks, a group of 1,000 people is just too small. And even if it was the literal majority, it still wouldn't matter. The government cannot be allowed, nor should we allow it, to regulate speech. Hell, we shouldn't allow it to regulate any behavior at all. Beyond, don't murder, don't rape, don't steal. As long as, beyond a basic set of laws concerning what you are not allowed to do, they should not be allowed to go beyond that. The government can stop you from committing a murder. They can stop you from committing a rape. They can stop you from stealing. They can stop you from any extension or manifestation of those 3 things. Mass murder, genocide, mass rape, gang rape, grand theft, larceny. But, They should not be allowed to regulate beyond that. This also means ending the drug war. This also means ending government licensing for marriage. It should be between you, your spouse, and if you happen to be religious, your deity. The government, it's none of their business who gets married to who. Absolutely none. And if a Christian baker doesn't want to bake your gay wedding cake, well, you know what? Go to a different bakery. That's the free market. That's how it works. Get used to it. It's capitalism. Why do I feel like I'm shot into a brick wall? You know what sucks about being the voice of reason? No one ever wants to listen to you. Anyway, that's all. Peace.